I'm gonna just be smiling the whole time.
You got a case of RDF, resting disengaged.
I'm gonna hang
resting
on every word.
You got resting disengaged face.
Resting Drew face.
Resting Drew face. Oh my gosh, it's the worst face to have.
Ha! Doorman face.
You burnt. Okay. All right. Shall we?
We shall.
All right. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to episode number 58 of the Goulet Pencast, where fountain pens are still a thing. I am Brian Goulet.
I'm Drew Brown.
And we are here from Goulet Pens to deliver this casual and informal, tangential and extraneous, superfluous and extemporaneous fountain pen show where we talk about what's going on at the Goulet Pen Company and in our fountain pen lives. Except today, because we're doing a special shortened episode.
No life.
No life. We have no life this week.
No life today.
That's right. We are shooting a timeless episode. Not meaning that it's going to last forever and be valuable for all eternity, just that we're not going to talk about things quite as timely because...
It exists outside of time and space.
Indeed. Yes, so we have a very ethereal episode. But basically, we're shooting this in advance so that I can spend a little time off with my family. So rather than just bailing on you all and saying, whatever, it's summer, who cares? We're like, you know what? It's really hot outside in a lot of places, and you may want to stay inside and listen to a pencast while you do your dishes or fold your laundry or whatever, clean your pens. So here we are. But we wanted to keep things going for you all, so we put together this all Q&A episode for you, where we're going to be talking about the purpose and hooded nibs. We're going to talk about chromashading or dual shading inks, new upcoming trend. Some of my Rubik's Cube puzzles that I find to be the most elegantly painful. How a dry climate can impact how a fountain pen dries out. And which Goulet team member has the penultimate pen collection. And we'll do a lightning round with a bunch of bonus questions as well. So, won't be quite as long as a regular one. Drew was like, we can make this one really quick. And I was like, absolutely. And then he scrolled through the notes and was like, Brian, why got so many bullets in here, man? I was like, I can't help myself.
We'll see.
So I got no feedback, but we're basically just going to jump right into the Q&A questions. So
that we are.
Let's make it happen. All right, Drew.
Okay, question number 1 is from Dawn. And Dawn asks, some pens, such as the Lamy 2000, have hooded or covered nibs. Does this serve a function, or is it simply a design element?
Great question. My initial reaction was, yeah, it's kind of both. And then I was like, where did the hooded nib actually come from? Because I always knew like the Parker 51, that was kind of like the iconic hooded nib that I was thinking about. And I was like, you know, I don't really know as much about the history of the Parker 51. Where could I learn about that? And our buddy Richard Bender over at richardspens.com, he's...
the original deep diver.
Oh, his entire website is just one gigantic deep dive. He has more information that he's probably lost in different iterations of his website than we will probably ever know. So especially if you're into vintage pens or pen history, his website is a tremendous resource. So to give him full credit, I'm not trying to like plagiarize and rip off his stuff, but legitimately he has some good historical information on there. So I pulled some inspiration from there, and I'm going to paraphrase some of what he spoke about in there. But definitely go check his site out because it's really good and very pertinent to today's stuff. So my thought was, hooded nibs. Probably the most prominent one that I think people are familiar with today, especially if you watch this pencast, is the Lamy 2000, because I think that's the most popular pen that's made today that has a hooded nib. And as I got to thinking about it a little bit more, I was like, what other pens even have hooded nibs? We've got the Jinhao 51A, which is essentially I'll call it a re-inspired Parker 51. It's very, very heavily inspired after the original.
That is
the original.
Very nicely said.
Very loosely, legally, acceptably said. But the Parker came out with the new version of the 51. They didn't have it for a long time. They brought it back a couple of years ago. We don't carry that one, but it is out and about and around, so that's something you can check out. Other than that, the Jinhao Shark pen, maybe? Does that sort of count? That sort of counts, right?
Sort of.
A little bit.
We actually don't carry the 51A any longer.
Really? At all?
51. No, I think the last time you
we
mentioned
were,
it,
it was on the way out, huh?
the last time you mentioned it, I was like, I don't think we carry that, and then I
Whoops.
found out we still had one.
Well-
but now, yeah, they're gone.
Well, it's still
But
out there. It's still being made.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there was let's see, Esterbrook did a semi-hooded nib a couple years ago.
They did?
Phaeton.
Yep.
That was semi-hooded, definitely vintage inspired as well.
Yeah.
A lot of the modern
Aurora
hooded
Aurora
nibs
had
you
one.
see.
Yeah.
Aurora had the duo cart.
Yep. Yep.
So they're definitely bringing them back every now and then,
Yeah.
obviously inspired from things that have come before. The 2000 is probably the only hooded or semi-hooded nib that can claim to not be vintage inspired because it was around
It's
in
still
the
vintage.
era that we would now consider vintage.
Yeah.
So
It's
everything
stable.
else that you'll see modernly available is pretty heavily vintage inspired, though.
Absolutely. So I was kind of curious about that. As I was really reflecting on it after getting this question, I was like, wow, there really aren't very many, or even some of the ones we've carried, like the 51A, like the Esterbrook and the Aurora for that matter. They don't stick around very long. And I'm like, that's kind of curious. Why is that? So that does help to inform maybe why you don't see them quite as much. So as I dove into it a little bit, I'll just kind of paraphrase some of the history of it from Richard's site. The function was actually the original part of it. It was not the form. It was not the aesthetics of it that was the inspiration for it coming out originally. So a little bit of pen history. In the 1940s, when fountain pens were really like starting to hit their prime, they were more mainstream, kind of like the smartphone of the day. It was like the portable method of communication, the communication tool. There were typewriters, there were, still dip nibs and other things like that. The ballpoint wasn't. It was starting to be prototyped around that point, but they were not reliable. They were super expensive. So the fountain pen was really in their heyday around that time. But the issue that a lot of people had was that the ink was smearing and they wanted it to dry faster and stuff like that. They didn't have the same ink technology that they have now. And even a lot of just the feed design and stuff like that was not where it is today. So there was much more of a problem with leaking and smearing and dry time and stuff like that. So they were essentially, Parker was inspired to come up with a faster drying ink, which is their, they called it the 51 ink or something, and it became known as a super chrome ink. So it was a not super healthy, not kid-friendly, definitely not a non-toxic version of ink back at that time, like many chemicals that were coming out in the 40s. So they came out with this ink. It was faster drying, but it needed to essentially have some sort of mechanism for keeping it wetter on the pen, or it would actually dry out in the feed too quickly. So they designed the pen around the concept of having an ink that would dry faster on the page. So at the time, they were touting that, like, as you were writing, you could basically drag a finger like a half inch behind your writing as you were going, and it would already be dry. So super fast drying ink, which was pretty appealing, but at the same time, it needed this kind of special pen. So they designed the Parker 51, which completely enclosed the nib and the feed and everything with the grip of the pen, which was novel for the time. And that helped to pair with that ink. Now you could use other inks in that pen, but you weren't supposed to use that super chrome ink in other pens or it would dry out too quick. So that lasted a little while, and the Parker 51 was an amazingly popular pen at the time. It actually inspired several other pens. In fact, I didn't even know this, Drew, but the Aurora 88, when it came out in 1947, had a hooded nib. And that is where the 88 got its start. So,
wow.
Kind of interesting. Yeah, the Parker 51 came out in 1941. And then there were a couple other brands that came out with some hooded nibs, kind of later in the decade. But, it was pretty popular. But I think what happened is there were a couple things. They designed, with the Parker 51, they designed essentially a new fins, like fin system on the feed. They had more fins, so there was like more ink that could be held in the collector part of the feed.
Right.
The feed. And I think what happened is other pen companies saw that design and ended up incorporating that into more conventional fountain pens with that exposed nib, and that helped the fountain pens to last longer and not dry out so easily. So that, in combination with the super chrome ink, which had some issues with it in itself, it just ended up being kind of complicated. And then, honestly, the when you have a hooded nib, it doesn't really look like a fountain pen. It looks more like a ballpoint or something like that. It doesn't, so I think that's part of the reason, especially in modern times today, why maybe you don't see popularity of a lot of hooded nib pens. I don't think we've really seen availability of a lot of them, but even the ones that we've seen come about, even ones we've carried ourselves and have touted quite a bit, they're popular for a little while, but then they kind of fizzle out, and it just doesn't have the staying power. I think part of that is because those who are into fountain pens now are like they do so by choice. And when you're looking at this big, bold, beautiful, striking nib with its wings just shining in the gleaming sun, and then you have this hooded nib with this little nubbin that's just kind of sticking out there. It's like, the aesthetics, I think, actually work against it. Even though I think the functionality is better with a hooded nib because it does keep the nib wetter. I think most modern pens and most modern inks are honestly good enough for most people's functionality to keep the nib wet, except maybe in some extreme circumstances with some really quick drying inks, where the hooded nib is not necessarily worth the trade-off for most people. I think, so over time, I think that's what's happened is you've had these hooded nibs that, maybe aren't as necessary anymore. They do make a difference in terms of how long the ink will stay wet in a pen. But I think honestly, a lot of it has to do with the feed system, which a lot of them have really good feed systems now. The modern inks, which are better at staying wet, and you have better capping. So I think just with a lot of pens that have cap inserts and things like that are better at staying sealed, improvements of plastics over what they were in the mid 1900s. You have a lot of pens that are staying wetter. So then as you're writing, it's just not, your nib itself is not exposed to the air all that much. And a lot of people are used to capping and uncapping. We have a lot more, snap caps and stuff like that today than maybe there were back in the day. I don't know that for a fact. I just completely made that up. But that's my guess, is that, yes, it does make a difference. But I think today, with all these factors involved, it's going to be pretty heavily a design choice to do it. And I think most people just don't want to hide the nibs. So you don't see a whole lot of them.
Yeah, and there's not really I've never personally used a hooded nib or even semi-hooded nib that was easy to totally disassemble either. Every hooded nib I've ever tinkered with has been quite difficult, and that just from a maintenance standpoint is challenging, but then from a manufacturing standpoint, it's pretty much the same thing. If it's hard to take apart from the consumer, it's going to be hard to manufacture and assemble at the factory. So if you're making a hooded nib, you need to basically say, okay, it's going to be a proprietary grip, a proprietary nib. You can't just have your normal pilot nib and then throw a hood on it because of those big wings. Unless you're going to have some big bulbous looking hood, like some Sith Lord or something, but it's not going to look good. It's not going to have that sleek profile. It's going to be big, billowy, and lumpy.
Look, a Sith Lord? What, like,
how they've got those?
Like
they've got hood? Giant hoods.
Like literally,
they've got massive
like hoods over their heads.
Yeah, so like you've got your standard raincoat that's like, all right, I'm going to cover my head, and then you've got the Jedi and Sith. They're like, I need this massive thing that like drapes over most of my face and billows onto my shoulders. It's too much hood. It's too much hood, and that's what would happen if you tried to hood a number 6 nib.
That's true.
Now, if you could do that, then more people would probably just make a grip section that can cover number 6 nib. But again, it's going to look stupid. Nobody's going to like it.
Well, and then like whatever you put on the grip, you got to fit it inside the cap too. So then you would need.
Oh yeah. Your cap would be obnoxious.
You would end up with like a Spaceballs. I forget the character's name. Not the Darth Vader character. Dark helmet. You'd end up with a cap that looks like that on the pen.
Yeah.
To fit your Sith Lord cloak hood on your number 6 nib.
I think that if they wanted to, Lamy could probably do that with their nibs. They're small enough.
Yeah.
They're narrow enough. If they wanted to adapt a form of grip section that fit onto the front and hooded it, they probably could. But then you're talking 100% aesthetics, because those don't have exposed fins anyway.
Yeah.
All of their fins are within the grip section, so you're not gaining anything. Yeah, you're not gaining any operational benefit there.
I could argue also, because somebody's probably just like screaming at their computer and or phone right now, saying like, what about retractable nibs, like a Pilot Vanishing Point or a Platinum Curidas or, something like that, Lamy Dialogue 3 for that matter. Like those are technically hooded nib pens. They're retractable, But, the effect that you get with something like a vanishing point or a Decimo for that matter, they've got, thin nibs that you like what you would see if it were on a hooded nib pen.
Yeah, yeah.
They're just, the hood is a trap door that allows the nib unit to retract. So, I mean, technically, if Pilot wanted to, they could take that same nib that they already have for the vanishing point. They could, kind of take the guts of it and just build it around a solid body, and make it. I don't see why they couldn't do that. They could make it.
I think that would be really cool, actually.
That would be kind of cool, right?
Pilot.
Like take
I really like that Pilot nib. I know that it's built to be functional inside of the capless body, but it's a really good writing nib and a really reliable nib.
Yeah, it doesn't have to.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I'd love to see that put on another pen just with a standard cap.
Yeah. In fact, we have a video that's going to be coming out. I've already shot it. It's in the editing stages right now, where I go through just like I did with the Sailor nibs, went through everything in pretty great detail, lots of macro imagery and stuff like that. Got a same one that's going to be coming out on the Lamy 2000. Take the whole thing apart, show you the nib, go through every nib size. You'll see there, it's actually kind of like a miniaturized version of what you see with the typical Lamy Steel or the 14K nib. That Lamy 2000 nib kind of has wraparound like that. It's not compatible with the other ones because it is smaller to fit through the hood there. But you can see an example of something that's not that far off from something like a Lamy nib. So, I mean, for sure, pen companies could design hooded nibs even around some of the pens they already have if they wanted to, just for a design aesthetic. But I don't think, just from what we've seen, I don't think the demand is really there to justify all that effort. I mean, we could be wrong about that.
Yeah,
Got me thinking about it.
I don't know, because they've definitely tried to do it. So I don't know if it's the fact that they tried to do it and it didn't work, or they tried to do it and no one was interested.
Yeah, because there's some. I mean, you can't just come out with it and be like, "Here it is, want it now." It's like there needs to be a compelling kind of reason if there's not a natural inclination.
Yeah,
for
I don't
it,
know if anybody's asking for it, to be honest.
I don't know. Maybe we could be,
because there are plenty of places you can still get vintage hooded nibs that have been restored
for sure,
and they're not that expensive.
No, in fact, there's so many millions of Parker 51s out there. I mean, it's one of the most collectible vintage pens that you can get. So honestly, if you want to try some hooded nibs, getting a vintage Parker 51, I'm sure you can find them on eBay, and every pen show is going to have. I mean, there are literally vendors there where all they have is Parker 51s restored and all kinds of stuff. So it's a very, now granted, I haven't been super hot on the scene the last couple of years. I don't think it's really changed, but I think that the Parker 51 is a pretty safe bet as a collectible pen. I'm not the authority on that though. I don't really live in the vintage world so much, but I know
neither do I.
It was one of the most popular fountain pens in history, so I think it's pretty safe bet. You can still find them pretty easily, and I've got a couple of them too. I don't have them here with me at home. I've got them in the office there, but they're great pens. They still write today. So pretty good. They'll hold up for a good 60, 70, 80 years and still keep on trucking. That's a pretty solid design. So there you go. That's what we got.
I'd be happy if I lasted that long.
Yeah, right. All right. That's all we got for the blah, 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 hooded nibs.
Yeah.
Moving on, question from Chantal. It says, I know about shading as a property of inks, but lately I've been hearing about dual shading and chromo shading. What's the deal with that, Drew? I know you've been playing with some of these.
That's a really good question. I've been thinking about that a lot, Chantal. And in fact, while Brian was making his Lamy video, I was making a video about chroma shading inks. Not necessarily a very informative video because these inks are kind of like what you see is what you get. Look, there it is. That's chroma shading. But I did want to take some time to showcase a lot of this ink because they are coming out with more and more. Sailor especially is really ramping this up. And I wanted to at least display and showcase some of what makes these inks really special, which is essentially just shading. However, the shading concept that we're most familiar with is when you have a color, usually a lighter color like a light blue or a lightish orange, you put down the ink, and then where the ink pools, either when it collects on paper that is kind of crinkled up or something, or generally when you lift your pen, you leave a little bit of a pool behind. Wherever it pools is usually darker than the rest of the strokes. You get these kind of pooling points, either within your swab or within your writing. So you create like, dark blue, light blue, dark blue, light blue, dark blue, light blue, or more or less light blue, lighter blue, light blue, lighter blue. So it's usually with very low saturated inks, not a lot of really dense looking inks. But it's usually just those two. It's the light color and then a lighter version of that color kind of mixed in here and there. With chromoshading inks, Sailor, some Ferris Wheel Press, some Colorverse, and then some brands that we don't carry and I'm not educated about, have these inks that are referred to as either dual shading, chromoshading, multitonal. There's a bunch of different terms for them. But they do the shading thing. But in addition to that, they also show off 1, 2, 3, sometimes different colors, like entirely different colors. It could be a pink and an orange, or a blue and a green, or a blue and a purple, or sometimes blue, green, and purple, all three together. And it's really incredible. And it's a really, really fun writing experience. It, like many, many inks, like shading, shimmering, or shimmer, does show off its properties much, much better on a paper with high coating like Tomoe River. So that it will always and is always the go-to show-off paper. So if you do have some of that, this will really show it off. But I have been playing with a lot of these recently in an attempt to make a video that showcases some of the better ones. And I've found that the Sailor Manyo inks are a great place to start. If there is a high concentration of chromoshading inks in a brand that we carry, the Sailor collection, the subset Manyo collection, probably the most target-rich environment.
Yeah.
And then the newer inks that we've come out with in the Manyo line, specifically Koke, Fuji, and Koke and Fuji are probably my two favorites. There are more, but those I think are the two heaviest hitters. And then an older one, the Sailor Manyo Neko Yonagi, that's a very, very popular ink. But Sailor Haha is the most popular. Not only the most popular Manyo, most popular chromoshading, but it is, in fact, the most popular ink that we sell currently under the Sailor line in its entirety.
So, yeah.
So it is a popular one, and for good reasons. There's also a subset of Sailor called Yurameku, and within that line, there is an ink called Amamoyoi. And that one is very pretty as well. I was playing with that one during this video, Brian, and it almost looked kind of camouflage. It was like a green, dark green, lightish green, brownish, like just a really, really fun ink once it dried too. And of course, my favorites, Sailor Ink Studio 123 and 224, which I like to call Rain Fluff and Thunder Fluff. And finally, one ink that I didn't really pay a lot of attention to, I alluded to it earlier, but during my preparation for this video, I kind of rediscovered, is Sailor Ink Studio 173. And whereas a lot of these chromoshading inks have tones of blue, purple, gray, and sometimes emerald, this one's totally out there with pink and orange. It's like pink and peach almost. And it's just out there. It literally, I swiped it on Tomoe River, and Tomoe 52 gram paper has this habit of crinkling up because it's so thin. When it gets saturated with liquid, it crinkles up like, a napkin or something very, very thin. And when it does that, when it crinkles, it creates this wave. And within that wave, obviously, you have peaks and valleys. So the ink pools in the valleys and is thinner up at the peaks. So you get that amazing pooling effect. So if you've got an ink that has shimmer, sheen, shading, or chromo shading, you're going to get a lot of really incredible things happening in those pools. And this ink was no exception. So it literally, on the valleys, it was, peach. In the peaks, it was pink, and it just did that like just a segmented pattern. It was really, really beautiful. So that was really fun for me to experience. Stay tuned, obviously. If you want to subscribe to the channel, you'll see the video pop up here in the next couple weeks. We're not really sure exactly which one's coming out first or second. We're figuring that out now, but it'll be there. And if you wanted to check out some of these inks that I mentioned, I'll have them in the comments below as well.
Yeah, keep in mind we're recording this almost 3 weeks in advance as well, so we may have even. I was just thinking about that. Yeah. It's like, we might already have a couple of these videos out by the time we let this one go. But anyway,
maybe I have no idea.
Now, my question for you, Drew, since you played with these a little bit more, you're talking about like the wrinkly nature of the paper and all that kind of stuff. Are you talking like doing full-on swabs and like dumping the ink on there? It's not like wrinkling up as you're writing with it, right? Like
But one swab. Like one quick swab will do it. It doesn't take a lot. It's not like I'm like going over it multiple times, but one single swipe of a cotton swab will wrinkle up the paper. It's that thin. If you've ever written with Tomoe 52, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. But with the writing, you'll get that pooling when you lift up the paper. And I know that I've mentioned this to you before, Brian. I don't know if I've mentioned it on the Pencast, but when I'm writing with inks that I know have a shading aspect to them, I'll actually adapt my writing to write a little bit more in a print cursive hybrid so that I can lift my pen up more frequently and create more of those pooling spots so that I get that multitonal effect.
Or I would say if you were going to write with, flex nib or something, a music nib, something generally wetter, you're going to get more of those chromoshading aspects to it, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely. The finer the nib, the less you're going to see.
Yeah, and the more absorbent the paper, the less you're going to see. It's kind of like shimmer or sheen in that respect, right? It's just, it's got, so I would say like in terms of, planning to use a pen and a paper that you get more of those characteristics, you can pretty much go by the same principles that you would for shimmer or sheen, right? It's basically the higher the concentration of the ink you put down, the more you get whatever the properties are, right?
That's right.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I'm curious to see if it's going to be like a newer trend of like more of this starts coming out. I mean, obviously people like it and more people buy it. It's going to become like shimmer, right? Where, it took, I don't know, the better part of 5 years, 7 years before shimmer really started to grab hold. I think about like the 1670s with the Urban inks that really started to have some shimmer. Sheen had a little longer life to it. Shimmer really started to, that was like a thing that happened in like 2010 onward. But now there are so many shimmer inks, so hundreds, literally. Yeah. I wonder if chromoshading is like the next wave. I don't know.
I think so. I think that I think it's super popular. I'm wondering if any of the other major ink brands like Diamine or some of the other Japanese brands are going to crack the code that Sailor has been able to figure out and actually start producing some of these things, because Pilot's never really been known as an ink company, but it does seem like they're paying a little bit closer attention, giving us a little bit more in the Iroshizuku space, finally coming out with cartridges and things like that. So I don't know. Maybe they'll do something fun. We will see. Time will tell.
That would be cool. Yeah, I think about like.
But for now, Sailor's the champ.
Yeah, I know you see a lot of variety with shimmer inks because you can essentially add a shimmer property to basically whatever ink you want, and there's different colors of shimmer and stuff. Sheening has been a little tougher. It's been a little tougher because I think the properties of the dyes that actually do a sheen, you're limited in what colors will actually sheen, what sheening, the result of it, what color comes as a like the base color of whatever you use, they tend to be really saturated, like blues and purples and pinks and stuff like that. Like you don't really see a lot of like browns or oranges or whatever with sheen. I think it's just whatever dyes. There's certain dye families that bring that sheen out more. I wonder if it's going to be like that with chromoshading. I don't know enough about the ink chemistry and the dye chemistry that is bringing out the chromoshading. I wonder if you have a lot of options, or if it's all going to be in this like light blue, gray, kind of green territory. And if it kind of like...
It seems that way. There are some outliers, but you're right. I think that right now you're starting to see that most things hover around the light blue area.
Yeah, and if that's the case, if it's all kind of within a certain range of colors, then you're only going to see but so many of them come out, right? So, yeah. It'll be interesting to keep an eye on it. I'm glad to see it coming out. So, yeah, very cool.
We've got a really funky question from Alan, Brian, that I put on here because I think you'd have a response to it. So, you and Alan have some similar interests. So, Alan says, my son has really gotten into cubes and similar puzzles and has been solving the easy ones we get him too fast. What's something that Brian thinks is appropriately grueling that might take him a while?
Well, I have a lot.
Brian, a known cube enthusiast.
I am a cube enthusiast. It's really funny because the other day, I told Rachel's parents about this. Rachel's parents just visited this past weekend. I'm not sure if I talked about this on the Pencast or not. I talk a lot and I forget who I tell what. But it was funny because I
do the same thing.
I was walking with Joseph to go out to the workshop or go somewhere with him, and he just kind of asked me out of the blue, he's like, you don't really have a lot of hobbies, do you? And I was like, do you like know me at all? But it's just one of those,
what?
It's just the same reason like when my kids talk about like,
you literally built a shelf with him last week.
So I had to dig in a little bit, and I'm like, what do you mean exactly? He doesn't.
Why would you say that?
It's just his 12-year-old brain. He doesn't view that as a hobby. He thinks hobbies are like video games and Legos and the stuff that he's into. You know what I mean? He doesn't view like whatever yard work and puzzles. And I guess the puzzles, he was like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about those. I'm like, how do you forget about them? They're all over the house. Like wherever the kids' socks are, that's where my puzzles are too, you know? Yeah, it was kind of funny. So just my own son, who knows me really, really well, I had to remind him of like, well, I do woodworking and I am into fountain pens and puzzles. And I had to remind him of all these different things. Like I do cycling, I do all this kind of stuff. I have Lego Technics. And he was like, oh yeah, I guess those are hobbies. You know, I was just like, dude.
Brian, why don't you play more Minecraft and Sonic? That's your problem.
Pretty much. But I told him it was a good lesson. I was like, you know, my hobbies are a little more practical. He was like, those are so practical. He's like, you're doing stuff, you're building things. I was like, yeah, well, I was like, you know, I have a lot going on, business and the family and all that kind of stuff. So I said, my hobbies tend to be more practical because that allows me to afford the time to do them more. If I'm actually like, other people benefit from my hobbies, you know, otherwise I would hardly ever get to do these things if I had to truly justify just completely just taking up time for myself.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So I always lean towards wildly practical hobbies because then it's like, if my hobby is like building stuff for other people, they're like, oh yeah, please like go in the workshop and build stuff because they're going to benefit from it. And I'm like, sweet. And it's easier for me to spend more time doing it. Anyway, that's tangent, but puzzles are something that are not beneficial to anybody else really, except, you know, I enjoy them. And so that was a kind of a me thing. But it also just helps me to like, I don't know, it's like a fidget toy sort of a thing, and it helps keep my mind occupied. And honestly, it was really good. I started doing the puzzle thing, I think when I first solved a Rubik's Cube, I would think I was 30 years old. So this was like 8 years ago, maybe. I just YouTubed video about how to do it, and the videos then were not that great. There's so many more videos out now. But I was like, you know, I make fountain pen videos. There's probably people that have videos on how to solve a Rubik's Cube. So I found this like really, really awfully rudimentary video and studied it. And after a month or so, I was able to solve it on my own. And then I memorized the algorithms and I was able to do it. And then I forgot for a couple of years. And then I kind of came back to it. Actually, the one who re-inspired me back to it was David Parker, Fig Boot on pens. He and I are buddies and ran into him at a DC pen show back in, I don't know, 2015, 2016, something like that. And, you know, he's a cuber as well. And he was like, yeah, I'm trying to get to where I can solve a 3x3 Rubik's Cube in under 30 seconds. And I was like, that seems like a cool goal. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'll pick it back up again. And I kind of relearned and bought some better cubes and stuff like that. And that's sort of like what re-inspired me, you know, about 5 years ago or so. And now I've really been into it. And it's kind of like, you know, this whole fountain pen thing, like the more you know me, you're like, oh yeah, Brian does this like with everything in his life that he gets into. It's like, yeah, it's a pattern now. So yeah, for me, you know, I did put some thought into, I haven't even touched on my bullet points yet. This is gonna be a long one, Drew, sorry. I totally lied about, I'll try to do this quick. Nope.
Don't worry, folks, we've got chapter markers.
So yeah, with puzzles, there's a few different ways to be challenged. It's kind of different for everybody. I would say definitely the most popular route to go is speed cubing. So there's competitions around it, basically solving puzzles as fast as you can. And there's timers. They actually make specific timers that have like stop and start things that are literally designed for solving puzzles. And
I've seen those.
And it's not just like, oh, what a weird thing. No, there's like, I'm talking well over 500,000 like actual competitors that have competed worldwide. It's an amazingly popular thing, mostly teenagers or younger. Mostly not 30-year-olds running a business, but you know, whatever we're gonna do. So I did that a little bit. I've never competed in anything. But I've, you know, timed myself with like apps on my phone and stuff like that. And
yeah, when we were flying to Italy, you were doing that on the plane. You had your little timer out.
Yeah.
It was frighteningly fast.
Yeah, I mean, I can.
You got down to 30 seconds, didn't you?
I've solved under 30 seconds a number of times. I've never like
that's crazy
averaged under 30 seconds, you know, and I probably could get there. It's actually harder for adults because our response time and our brains just don't work as quick as younger folks.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah, so that definitely plays out. So yeah, you see like all the world competitive speed cubers in like 15. I mean, like the record for solving a 3x3 Rubik's Cube, I think is 3.47 seconds. It's kind of amazing with a raw scramble. So like they pick it up, you get 15 seconds to review it, whatever the pattern is. There's 43 quintillion combinations that it could be. So you really don't know what you're going to get. You know, it's like, I'm sure I've shared that at some point in the Pencast, but I mean, literally even with 500,000 people that are speed cubing over and over and over and over and over and over again on practicing and stuff. It hasn't even been like a fraction of a percent of the combinations that people have even seen yet of all the cubes that have ever been done. It's amazing. So many combinations. Anyway. Okay. Again, haven't even stick to the bullets, Brian. Stick to the bullet points. This is gonna be so long.
I'm sorry, I put this on
Speed
here.
cubing.
This is
So
my
speed
fault.
cubing is by far the most popular way. There are specific puzzles that are done in competitive spaces: 3x3, 4x4, 5x5. It goes all the way up to 7x7. They have other ones called like a mega minx. So it's like a dodecahedron shape. I just realized this is actually not a competitive Megaminx cube. It's a variant.
I was about to say, yeah.
It's a variant of it, but anyway.
Yeah,
so
get
they
that
have,
out of here.
So there's some different shapes that are more or less, I guess if you want to call it, on the basic side, which is still not basic. They're still complicated, but the ones that people can solve in like a matter of seconds with enough practice. And really the focus on that is, it kind of makes sense if you think about like teenagers. They don't have a lot of money, but a good cube is not that expensive, and they have tons and tons and tons of time. So they just solve over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and they memorize tons of algorithms. Your average speed cuber who's super competitive memorizes something like 400 different algorithms, and then it's all about muscle memory of doing the different like finger tricks and stuff, and then visual recognition. So you recognize a certain pattern, you do the thing to get it to the next step, and you're just doing that super, super, super fast. So it's just super fast practice like anything else. And that's how you get really good. And I was like, well, that's fun, but like, what's my end goal with that? Personally, not much. I'm just solving the same thing. So like I solve it more just for relaxation, kind of fidgeting, that kind of thing. But what I really personally enjoyed is getting into different variants of puzzles. You know, it's cool to have a 3x3, but if I can have, you know, a 3x3 like this one that's got like a maze kind of a pattern to it. So not only do I have to solve it with the right colors, but the orientation of the pieces have to be right in order for the lines to match up. So I can actually solve this and have the right colors in the right spot, but then the pieces won't be turned the right way. So it's like, oh, I have to know not only how to do a regular 3x3, but I have to think about a few extra little things. So that's more what I've enjoyed about the puzzles is I'm not just solving the same thing over and over again and doing it faster, but I'm getting other puzzles. I'm like, oh, this one is slightly different. I have to do a few extra things when I solve this one, you know, than I do with a regular one. Or there's like collectible ones that I get into, like this Lego, you know, one, which is fun because my son and I both love Lego, but you can literally like take them off. I mean, it's easy to solve because you can take the bricks off and just put it on the side. But, you know, you can like put like minifigs on it and stuff. So it's more of a design aspect. Or, you know, there's other ones like these conjoined ones, right? So like you're solving multiple cubes, but you can't turn it certain orientations. So you end up with additional constraints that have things. So it's like I can learn a lot of the same movements and algorithms, but then with a slightly different variation of puzzle, it's like, oh, this one's a little bit different. So I'm sort of like building a repertoire of algorithms depending on the style of the puzzle. So that's what I've really enjoyed with my personal puzzle solving. So that's one way to go, is with different variations. Then there are different size puzzles. You know, for example, I have the dodecahedron shape, which has, you know, its own sort of algorithms, but then you can get ones with many more layers to it. So this is also a dodecahedron, but it's got multiple layers. You know, so this is is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it's an 11 layer. So literally you can turn in every single one. And it ends up looking like absolute chaos.
Fix it!
That little thing in there. And this like,
stop it.
Yeah, so I've solved this and scrambled it multiple times. But then I did this like star pattern to it because I thought that was fun, right? And the star pattern is actually not that complicated to do in the grand scheme, but you know. So I like the big puzzles with lots of layers because you can not only solve them and stuff, but you can actually create patterns to it. And to show another example of that, I have this 15 by 15 cube where I solved it, but then I did it in this like sort of like diamond sort of pattern to make this layout, which is pretty sweet. But I mean, it's you turn it through and through. These tend to be pretty expensive because there's so many pieces. They actually have videos and stuff where people are like actually break these apart and take them out into all their separate pieces because it all has to be connected to a central core that everything turns around. So you end up with this like tiny little piece, but it's got this like really jaggedy kind of thing that's got to connect all the way to the middle and be able to slide around it. So the engineering behind these is actually quite complex and really fascinating. I think the highest ordered production puzzle they have right now in a traditional Rubik's form is a 21 by 21, and it's like $1,500. It's amazingly expensive. And I'm like, okay, I'm not that into it. But, over time, they keep developing more, and then you get ones like this. So these are fun.
Oh my God.
But like, I can solve a regular 3x3 in 30, 40 seconds. This one takes me like 3.5 hours or something like that, just because it's so many pieces, so many turns. But the algorithms are not that much more complex. There's just so many more pieces. It just takes a long time. So it's more of an endurance thing. It's kind of a different, I can, pick it up and solve like one layer, and then I'll like come back and pick it up later. So it's more of a long-standing thing. But then you can get into other types of puzzles, which are, so these are all like through and through, where there's like a central core and there's all these layers that rotate around. You get into other puzzles like this one, which looks really big and complex, right? And it is to a degree.
Yeah.
But it's a face-turning puzzle. So there's a hollow core inside of here, and everything that I'm turning is on the face, and I'm moving pieces just around the kind of exterior of the puzzle. So slightly different construction. Some of the complexity that you get with these ones ends up being where, this is one of my favorite puzzles. It's called the truncated icosahedron. So you get into some really fun geometric names as well. So the one with this is you have, let's see here, it's 12 sides on here, 4 sides on here, 6 sides on here, and so like they all intersect with each other. So there are like certain shaped pieces can only be in certain places. So it's actually, there's fewer algorithms that you have to learn to solve a puzzle like this than there is even just on a regular 3x3, because there's only so many places that each piece can go. But the challenge with it is you end up with so many different colors that are so close to each other. And half the time you're just like hunting and searching, like, where is that slightly dark green, but not that dark, but is that all the way over here? And you're like, how do I like maneuver it and get it all the way over to where I need to go? So not only that, but the company that makes this, their brand is Very Puzzle. Almost all of these come from Asia too, by the way. So the company that makes this one, you actually assemble it yourself. So they send you the kit, all the pieces, the stickers and everything. So I freaking love that, because I love building stuff. It's sort of like building a model kit where there's like all these plastic pieces and you got to like snap them all out and kind of put it together. And then you also understand better like how the thing is actually constructed. So I have a number of really big puzzles like this where I've actually had to assemble them and put the stickers on and stuff. And I love it. That's as enjoyable to me as it is even learning how to solve the puzzle. But the problem with ones like these is there are not that many people that do them. So I definitely have some of these bigger puzzles where I'm like, okay, this one's sort of similar to this puzzle that I know about, but I don't quite know how to actually solve like the final steps of this one. And I definitely have that with a couple of puzzles, like this next one I'll show you. So I have this one, which is another it's a face turning puzzle, but it still has like 2 layers to each little section here. I'm this close to solving it. I just have this little bit at the end here, and I just can't. It's always hardest to solve the very end of the puzzle. I have not yet done it. There are no videos out there. I'm on my own trying to figure it out. It's just too dang complicated. And
well, Brian, it sounds like you need to do a video on that.
There are some videos out there. There's a guy, Pete.
I thought you said there were none.
Well, there's videos out there of like some bigger puzzles like this. A lot of them are unboxings and people are just kind of showing them. There are definitely fewer ones where people are like showing how they actually solve them, especially because some of them take like 7 hours, so it's like, you got to really want it. But anyway, it's all part of the fun, right? So it's a beautiful pain. And then just to keep it moving along, I just wanted to show this cute little, I have a little 3x3 here. It's the smallest one I have. So it's functional, it's fully functional. So it like turns, so that's kind of fun. So there's like little collectibles like this that aren't that practical, but are still fun. And then I have the last category, which are ones that are just frustrating, just either.
Are these the ones that you're recommending for Alan's son?
It depends on what degree of pain you want to put your son through.
His behavior recently?
Yeah, so like the ones with lots of layers or lots of pieces, those just take a long time and they take endurance and willpower to do them, but they're not super complicated. These other ones are complicated and frustrating because there's other stuff going on. So I'll show a couple of the ones that I really just don't enjoy that much. But this one's kind of cool, but I've not yet solved it. It's a Sudoku cube. So, Sudoku is where you have like 9 numbers in a square and it's in like a whole grid pattern. Well, it's a cube where you should be able to do a Sudoku on here, but it's just so dang confusing. Especially because I'm trying to orient the numbers correctly, and I'm like trying to make sure it's basically where you're only supposed to have one number in per side and one number per row and all this stuff. And it's just thinking about it in a 3D fashion like this.
No, honestly, that's a little triggering for me just looking at it. If you told me, imagine like if you hooked me up to some sort of monitor and said, picture a cube and every square of the cube is covered in a number, like that right there, that like I'm getting anxious, seriously, just like,
especially because
I want you to put it away.
Well,
I want you to put that away.
Yeah, especially because it's 3-dimensional. And especially when you get to like the second and third layers as you're solving it, you have to mix everything up. So you have to know the algorithms well enough to be able to essentially do it from memory and then know where the pieces should have gone so that you can do the next few algorithms, and then it should eventually end up to where you're trying to get it to go. So you'll do that and then you're like, okay, did I do that right? I don't think that's in the right place now. There's 2 8s there. Crap. Okay, which is that? So this one is like, I have not yet solved this one. It's pretty painful.
Let's keep that one away. All of the other ones up until that one, I'm like, oh, cool, fun, colors, yay.
Yeah.
They look confusing, but still fun.
Yeah.
That did not look fun at all.
This is another pretty frustrating one. This is a official Rubik's brand. This is the Impossible Cube.
I sent you this one, and you said, yeah, I already have that.
I had like 3 people send me this cube because they know I'm into cubes.
Yeah.
This one, you can actually find it like in Target and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So basically, they have holographic stickers to them that change color as you move the cube. So it comes in a solved state when you get it, but that as soon as you mix it up, you're like, well, wait a minute. You're like, that one is only green. This one's green, but it's orange. Crap. And then you're like, wait a minute, that's not the right place. And it's like, oh man, this is really confusing. So
have you solved it yet?
I have not. I don't think so.
Man.
I don't think I've solved it fully.
Maybe it's solved right now.
I don't think so. It's hard because even when you solve it, it doesn't look totally, solved because it's a holographic. Anyway.
Oh man.
So ones like that are
brutal.
Are a test of pain. And then I have another one that is just one of the absolute worst that I've not solved. As soon as I broke it to a certain point, I just stopped and I haven't touched it again. So this is called the Sun Minx. So it's a dodecahedron pattern, but you can turn the faces of it, like a normal cube. It's also like kind of tight and doesn't flow really well. So it's not like super enjoyable to turn. It's kind of stiff. So what's interesting about this one, it's a shapeshifter as well, as you can see. So not only can you turn a face of the puzzle, but if you turn it partially, then you can turn it again, and you can actually like move it so that your pieces end up jagged and mixed up.
Oh no.
But what's particularly confusing about this puzzle is the underlying construction of this. There's like a piece that you actually can't see that has to line up to the piece that you can see on the top in order for it to be able to rotate back in a certain place. So you have to basically like kind of press down and inspect inside. It's kind of a little bit of a design flaw, I think, of the way they made this particular puzzle. So it can be done, but if you scramble it in a certain way, which you can't even really keep track of. I was just trying to like scramble 2 layers of it, and then I like did something and I was like, oh crap, I didn't mean to do that. And I tried to get it back and I just made it worse, and this is what it looks like now. And I was like, I wasn't even really trying to scramble it. And I was like, oh crap.
Oh man, that sounds like it's probably not all the way you. That sounds like it's not a super well made thing.
Yeah, but I mean, there are people who are on YouTube and stuff like that who are really into it. And honestly, some of the people who get really into it, most of them tend to be, more on the adult side. They end up actually like 3D printing their own puzzles. They design their own, they'll take an existing puzzle core structure and shape it differently on the outside, and it kind of creates a new shape of puzzle. So the whole the whole puzzle thing, especially in the last like decade or so, has exploded in popularity in so many puzzle variants now. Like I really got into it at an exciting time. So that's been pretty neat to just keep up with new puzzles that come out. But it's very much a user-driven, like community-driven thing, to the point where like some of the puzzles that you see now were ones who were essentially designed by, puzzle enthusiasts, and then they worked with a company, and now it's a mass-produced puzzle. So, it's pretty.
It
neat.
sounds like from what you've said that Alan's kid could probably use one of the impossible ones just to keep him occupied. And then maybe one of the larger endurance-y ones that you mentioned earlier. That's not like really hard, but just takes a long time.
Yeah. I enjoy. I mean, it all depends on kind of what you're into. Like, honestly, for younger kids, I think, getting more into like the speed cubing kind of side of it is pretty fun because you learn dexterity, you learn focus. There's a huge community around speed cubing, and that's most of what the younger folks end up doing. Is there's tons of YouTube channels and all that kind of stuff. So it's really, really good for that. So it's a great way for somebody younger who's into puzzles to plug into more of a community. When you get into the weird stuff like I am, you're really kind of off on your own, and it can be kind of lonely when you're solving these big weird puzzles. Not unlike if you're into pens and you get into, the really popular aspects of pens. There's lots of people, but then you get into like really obscure vintage restoration and stuff. You're like, there's like nobody that knows it's like the information's out there, but I got to really go find it. That's kind of where I am in this territory. So yeah, but anyway, that's more than anybody probably cared about with my little puzzle obsession. But it's been
I love the passion though. I really do.
It's been my weird thing that it's like, I mean, I love pens, of course. But, it's just nice to have another little outlet, another little...
Oh, we all have multiple rabbit holes.
Yeah. But, Anyway, that's what I got.
There we go. Cubes.
Sweet. All right. Drew, I got a question for you from Jamie.
Okay.
What do you know about the effects of dry climate contributing to dry starts and dry or scratchy fountain pen problems? Our high desert humidity is often 10% or less. I put a few eyedroppers of ink from a small diamine container into a tiny but easier to access aperitif glass. I don't know what that is. And later that day, it was all dried up. That gave me pause about my pens and possibly why I have trouble. Fix. THX.
Well, yes. You are not wrong about your hypothesized correlation there, Jamie. It definitely has an impact, for sure. So the more, let's use water in this case, since that's what is evaporating out of fountain pen ink. And let's say that the air has water in it sometimes, which it does. If there is more of the evaporating thing in the air, the thing that's evaporating is going to evaporate slower. And the opposite is also true. If there's hardly any of the thing that's being evaporated in the air, then it's going to evaporate much, much faster. It's kind of a gross analogy, but it's not unlike working up a sweat while you're working in Louisiana versus working up a sweat when you're working in Nevada. You're going to feel that very differently because the air is going to keep it on you in Louisiana and it's going to take it off of you in Nevada. And that's a lot of what's happening with the fountain pens is if you are in an arid climate, the air is going to pull that moisture right out as fast as it possibly can. Whereas if you are in a really humid environment and your fountain pen is exposed to the air, then there's not as much of an absence of moisture in the air, so your fountain pen is going to stay wetter longer. Or any liquid that's sitting anywhere is going to remain in its liquid state longer. So with fountain pens, it's, what would you say, Brian? Like 90% water, 80% water, more? It's mostly water.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like by far, maybe 95, 90.
Yeah, it's up there.
Yeah, it's way up there. So most of it is water. So it will evaporate and evaporate quickly, especially if you are in the Southwest region, for sure, in the United States. That's pretty much it. I would just say there's a couple pens I would recommend. TWSBI is usually really good with drying out. They seal really well. Platinum is often a champ at sealing in and out moisture. And then I've had really good luck with Pilot as well. There are a ton of brands that have really great sealing pens within their brands, but those three, pretty much anything within those three brands, I've had excellent luck with just across all pens within that brand. But there are many, many pens that have very well engineered inner caps that are effective as well. And if you have a pen that you're particularly in love with and it may not have a great capping system, then you could also try to use some Private Reserve Infinity ink. I would give that a shot and see what that does for the pen you're currently using. Maybe try some samples to see if it actually works. And if it does work, it's a pricier inks, but samples are a great way to try before you buy, before committing to a pricier ink. But if it actually works, like this ink I've used throughout an entire day before, leaving my pen uncapped and writing with it just a little bit every half hour, and didn't cap it all day, and it wrote for me every half hour for an entire day in an office environment, though, which is very different than where you're at for sure. But it might help. It's definitely worth the sample price for sure. That's pretty much it for me.
So I had to look up what is apéritif. It depends. It might be a French word.
What'd you find out?
So it's basically like a cocktail type drink that you would have as like an appetite stimulant before a meal. So it's usually very intense flavor, but not high in volume. So it's basically a very, very small glass, sort of like a shot glass, or like a little shot glass, wine glass type of a thing. I think it depends. I don't know. There's all kinds of things related to it.
Does it have a stem on it?
It looks like it. It doesn't look like there's one specific style or shape or something like that. And a lot of times they can use like a martini glass or whatever. It depends on the drink. But the ones that I'm seeing that I'm probably visualizing, for something like this, it's either like a martini shape or like a small, like stemmed, kind of wine glass, but it's like very small, maybe holds an ounce or two, so basically a small open glass, which. Yeah.
And the wider and more shallow the evaporating liquid is, the more quickly that will evaporate as well.
Absolutely.
Rather than it being in a tall, narrow container, because whatever that you're exposing more of it to the air. So obviously, decanting it into a larger vessel like that might actually make it evaporate quicker than if you just set it out in a little sample container with the cap open.
Yeah, the more, like you said, the more it's exposed to air, the more it's going to evaporate. But yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Relative humidity really makes a huge difference. Very cool.
For sure.
All right.
Okay.
That's my notes.
You want to tackle this last one here? All right.
Let's do it.
This one is coming to us from Constantine. It says, "Hey, Brian and Drew. Brian, you've documented the insane amount of pens in your personal collection. My question is, within your company, who comes in second? And with how many? And yes, glass pens count."
I don't know that glass pens are really going to skew the results of this.
No, they're definitely not. Definitely not.
I don't know anybody on our team who has more than like a glass pen.
No, it's pretty just, you keep one for the utilitarian aspect of testing inks, but you don't need more than
I probably
one.
have the most because I've held on to like every variant we've had for Jeroboam and Roenklinger and all that.
And our options for getting them in the U.S. are pretty limited. We don't have a ton, and the ones we do have access to aren't like amazing, and you're still dealing with some variable tipping widths, so you kind of hope you're getting one that's not scratchy and isn't really weird.
So to answer this question, I mean, I don't really keep tabs on everybody's individual pen collections.
You don't?
No, it's not really a part of, what we do. We're not like Big Brother watching everybody's pen collections. And like some of our team, they'll buy pens through us. Some of them get into vintage things or whatever, and they buy them on eBay or whoever, wherever else. Some people were into pens before they joined our team, and then they get into it more when they're here, so it's like, I don't know. People are buying pens all the time and using them and stuff like that. But we did ask our team, like, hey, we kind of know like who's the most into them, and it's like who might be more of the front runner. So I think we've, without like thoroughly going through everybody's collection, I think we got a couple of standouts, a couple of front runners, and I think we have a clear winner. So one of them, who I think is the runner-up, or the third runner-up, I guess, if you're considering the runner-up to be whoever has the most next to me, Jeremy, who's our data analyst. So he was actually into fountain pens before he joined our company, which is actually more rare than you would think. So he was already into them, joined, and has stayed into them, maybe not so surprisingly. has acquired a whole bunch and all that. So I don't know exactly how many he has, but it's a pretty respectable amount if I'm not mistaken. But the one who's the front runner up would be actually my executive assistant, Jen. So she wasn't really into pens until she joined us. And then she likes beautiful things. She has also somewhat of a collective nature to her. She collects gaming dice as well, which I think she has even more gaming dice than she has fountain pens. So if you're into that, krakendice.com, very cool site. I can see the appeal. I draw a line for myself. I'm like, nope, I can't fall down that rabbit hole. I have enough as it is, despite my son thinking I have no hobbies. I can't get into that too. But anyway, so Jen, I forget how many pens she has, but I know it's well over 100. In fact, we kind of joke that like every pay period she gets a new pen, more or less. She does have a lot of pens, so yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, she actually saw this question come through because she helps us monitor the pencast at gouletpens.com email address, and she saw this question and immediately thought, "Oh no, this might be me."
Yeah.
So she reached out to our team and was like, "Hey, we got a question. Is this me or does anybody else?" And then Jeremy came and was like, "Well, I have this many," and she's basically like, "Oh, okay, yeah, it's me."
Yeah, it might be me.
Yeah. It's definitely Jen for sure.
Now Rachel's in the running too. You know, she's got a respectable number of pens herself, and I would say just for pure like quality of pen, quality compared to quantity. I have a large quantity of pens. I have a lot of really high quality pens, but the ratio of really high quality to maybe lower quality or prototype or whatever kind of pens is going to be higher for me. That ratio is going to be lower price, lower whatever. I have more variants of lower price pens and things like that. Rachel, she doesn't hang on to the lower end stuff. Everything she has is like pretty nice pens. So she has I would call it a more curated, nicer collection. Mine is just massive. So I think...
Well, yours is also utilitarian in that you collect them for future reference.
Yeah, like,
you wouldn't have as many of the same pen if you didn't want to make sure that...
Yeah, exactly. I definitely have quite a few pens where I don't keep them just for my own gratification. You know, I keep them for historical reference, for, essentially for like the company, the history of the company kind of a thing.
Yeah, like all the Lamy special editions, you never go back and be like, "Ooh, you know what I want to use today? One of the Lamy candies." It's just, you need it there because Lamy's going to...
Those I do, I am a little more into those, but I have like every past variation since we've been carrying it of like the Platinum Preppy and like Preppy highlighters and Preppy, all these other variants that we've had, just so it can be like, oh yeah, didn't the old Preppy used to have the barcode was different and all that, or the nib was colored instead of silver? I keep that stuff so that we can reference it, but I'm not like, ooh, let me use the 2010 version of the Preppy with the red nib. Like, no, I'm not really using those things very often, but I do.
What do you think
refer back to them?
What do you think your pen collection would look like if you did not work here? And if you just found out about fountain pens, you still liked them, but did not pursue fountain pens as a career option? You did something else?
It's really hard to say. Because the two were so closely intertwined.
Yeah.
It's impossible to say.
I think I would have 3 pens. I really do.
I could see you like working your way over time, narrowing it down to 3,
Yes, I would probably get a bunch and then realize, because I did the same thing with my knives and my watches. I said, you know what? No, I want a couple of ones that I really like, and that's what I did. So I would probably stick with that 3-pen rule, but just as an ownership principle, not only an in-use principle. I could see that.
Yeah.
It'd be difficult. And like you, I'm like, it's very hard for me to do that because I'm like, I can't even.
Well, you're like, you know too much. Like it's too intertwined at this point. Like,
yeah.
Like now.
But if I compare it to some of my other daily carry hobbies, I could get there mentally because I've seen myself do that in other areas.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. It's interesting for me. So.
Cool. All right. Well, there you have it.
Cool. All right. Now we got a lightning round. So, this is going to be a shorter episode than usual. though I've been trying my hardest to not make it short. But Drew pulled some lightning round questions that I think will, this time, we've, in the past when we've done this, we've alternated, but this time we're going to do them both. I think they'll be a little on the quicker side, so we should be able to make it happen. So, all right. I don't know. We didn't write down who was going to do which one.
How about you read the first three? I'll read the second three.
Sounds good. All right. So Starina Frazier says, how old is the oldest pen you have?
For me, it used to be older. I've traded a few. Right now, I don't think I have anything prior to the 90s.
Really?
I used to. I used to have some from more turn of the century. No, sorry, more mid-century. But
you're talking like old, you're talking old by like age of the pen, not how long you've had it, right?
Oh yeah,
like when the pen was made. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have plenty of pens from 10 years ago, but yeah, as far as age of the pen itself, I don't have anything right now. I really don't.
Yeah.
Everything's fairly modern. Yeah, pretty lame answer on
wow.
that one. What about you?
What a noob.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of my collection is going to be modern pens. Modern being from 2010 on for when we started this business. So I do have some vintage ones though. It's hard because I don't know exactly what year a lot of my vintage pens are because I bought them, kind of with limited information, and I haven't, I haven't researched deeply enough to find out the exact year if it's even possible. But I think some of the older ones that I have, I have Parker 51, Parker 21, so those are going to be like mid-century. I have an old Waterman Pink, which I think is pretty old. I have an old Maybe Todd Swan, which I think is probably from the 40s or 50s. So I would say I've got several pens that probably fall into that 1940s, 50s category. I don't know if I have anything that's older than that, but it's
Is the
possible.
Pink their flex nib?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ooh,
so it's got a really flexy nib. Yeah.
I don't know a lot about Waterman. All my Waterman information comes from one gentleman, but I believe that the Pink is a highly sought after version.
It's a pretty sought after. So I have an old Schaefer Snorkel, which again is going to be, I don't think it's going to be quite as old as those. I think that one's 60s, 50s, 60s. So I don't know exactly how old some of these things are. And I have like an old Schaefer that I don't even know what model it is. It's a brown kind of smaller Schaefer. I just kind of traded it with somebody and didn't have good information on it. I don't really know what model it is. So, I've got several pens that are at least 60, 70 years old, maybe 80. So it's pretty old. It's pretty respectably old, but they still work great. Especially if you want to get into vintage pens and stuff, like any pen show, you're pretty much going to be able to get all kinds of cool old stuff because there's so many millions, hundreds of millions of pens that have been made over the years. A lot of people have parts and restore them and stuff. Anyway, too much. Lightning round. Okay. Next question we have is from PBO2B Have Gun. Okay. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
No. Next question.
Yes, absolutely.
No.
I think it's actually the best place for pineapple to be is on pizza. No. I thought sweet and savory. Oof, yes.
On everything. Don't talk to me about maple bacon or
Oh,
honey ham
yes.
or pineapple on your
Yes.
pizza. Get it away from
Yes.
me. Give me salt and pepper on my meats, and that's it.
That's good too.
Don't bring fruit into my meat zone.
I
Don't bring fruit into my tomato zone. I know fruit's a tomato. Don't give me that. But tomatoes are fruit. I don't want to hear it. No to the pineapple. No.
Yes.
No.
All the pineapple.
I would rather have anchovies than pineapple on my pizza.
And why are you hating on anchovies? What's wrong with anchovies?
Anchovies are just universally considered to be bad. They're very, very salty. But
Fair enough.
Honestly, maybe I would choose pineapple. I don't want either of them. But I'm trying to illustrate.
Maybe anchovies and pineapple. That could be the next best thing. No, what I like pineapple, and then instead of using tomato sauce, barbecue sauce.
What are you doing? You did not just say barbecue sauce.
That is my favorite pizza.
Brian Goulet, I am not having this. I am not.
Barbecue sauce as the sauce.
Oh my.
Extra cheese, chicken, and pineapple, and bacon. That's the best.
I'm very glad that you like these things, Brian.
Like the pineapple, bacon, and barbecue sauce. That's what I'm talking about. I love it.
I don't want to take these away from you. I'm glad that you have them and they make you happy, but I am going to have nightmares about what you just said.
I love it. It is my favorite. That's my favorite pizza. This makes me happy.
My wife often finds ways to torment me with sweet and savory flavors. Like her favorite. One time I think that she actually, and my brother too. My brother Zach, both of them. Like I think one time I offered to have dinner made for Zach, and he said, "You know what I want? Sloppy Joe," because he knows I hate Sloppy Joe because it's that weird, sweet, meaty thing, and he did it just to upset me. And oh god,
chicken and waffles with the syrup.
No, chicken waffles with gravy, sir.
No.
Gravy.
No,
get your syrup out of here. No syrup on waffles without chicken, sure.
Metro Diner.
But if it's
Metro Diner, chicken and waffles with the syrup that's got the hot sauce in it. So good. So good.
I like hot things on chicken, but this no. You're
I mean, it makes it. You got the waffles with the syrup and the chicken. It all makes sense. It's all good, man.
You're crossing boundaries.
So good.
You're crossing boundaries. Also, Metro Diner's gone.
What do you mean it's gone?
It's gone. It's not there anymore. Victim of COVID.
Oh, well.
Yeah, the one in Willow Lawn's gone, and the one in Short Pump's gone.
I got to eat it at the original Metro Diner down in
Oh, maybe that's still around. I don't know. Oh, okay, that might still be there.
Yeah, it was good. Anyway, well, we learned that Brian has better taste than Drew.
I am upset at you.
All right, and Make Right Stuff says, now that cake versus pie... Man, I'm getting hungry. Ask these food questions. Now that cake versus pie has been debated, cookies or cupcakes?
Cupcakes.
Really?
Yes, it's more substantial.
What do you mean it's more substantial? What are you talking about?
It's a larger, more expensive object. There's value there. Cupcakes are more expensive than cookies.
You need it. I've eaten some cookies that feel like they are worth some stuff. Let me tell you.
No, you're right. This one's close for me. Now, if it were muffins, I would absolutely choose muffins over cookie any day of the week. Cupcakes are a little different because sometimes they can be a little too much with the icing. So I could see cookies. But I feel like if you say, hey, would you like this cookie or like this cupcake? I would feel like, well, let me get the larger object. I feel like I should go with the cupcake. But if you're talking like a massive...
I've had some pretty big cookies.
Yeah, no, if you're talking about one of these monster cookies with like big honking chunks all over them, then okay, yeah, sure. What do you think? You're a cookie man?
I mean, all of this sounds good to me. I'm not hating any of this conversation. I mean, I like them both, but to me, like, it's not as much of like a one versus the other as like a cake versus pie. Like to me,
it is
like,
now.
If I'm like cookies or cupcakes, to me, I'm just like, well, I'll just have like one of each. Like it's not like I feel like it's one or the other. But I would probably lean towards cookies. Yeah, I like cookies.
Now, this is one of those things where I will say quality matters. If you're talking about a crappy cookie and a crappy cupcake, I'll pick the crappy cupcake. But if you're talking about like the best of the best cookie and the best of the best cupcake, I'll probably pick the cookie.
I think
because like cake and pie, I think one has higher peaks and lower valleys, and I think that cookies can max out at a higher point than cupcakes can.
I think I've had a lot more mediocre cupcakes.
Yeah, exactly. But the lowest, like most dry, sad gas station cookie, I would pick a cheapo plastic wrapped Little Debbie cupcake over that cookie, if you know what I mean. So, but like, have you had one of those crazy obnoxious cupcakes at Disney though? Like where it's like the one of those like crazy peanut butter and jelly cupcakes or something like that. You can do some crazy stuff with cupcakes too.
You can do some pretty wild stuff with cupcakes.
Yeah, but again, a lot of it is overwhelming. It's just like so sugar.
That's true. They do get pretty intense. But I don't like. Yeah. A cupcake to me is it's like a commitment. You can't just be like, I'll just have like half this cupcake now, and then I'll just like save the rest for later.
So you can't handle the full cupcake then? Huh?
I mean, believe me, Drew, I can handle it.
I know. I
can handle some cupcakes. But I don't know, and they're messier.
They are.
You know, I don't know.
Okay, I think you've pushed me over to the cookie zone. I think you have.
There's nothing wrong with either. I like cookies.
I'll join you over the cookie zone.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
Sarah K. Dietz asks us, which inks are you currently using?
I mean, I'm always using a bunch of inks because I never clean my pens. But let's see here. I got a Robert Oster Blue Water Ice. That's kind of like my go-to. I got a big bottle.
Which ones are you using? Not inks.
I'm using it.
Which ones do you have inked up?
No, I've got that inked. I'm using it. I'm using. Let's see here. I just used Nude Blues Black because I did the Nib Nook for the Pilot Custom 912 recently. I have just recently used, for the Lamy 2000 video, I used Lamy Crystal Azurite. So that one's pretty recent. I do like that color a lot. Ones that I've got on the docket to use are the new Monyo chromoshading inks.
Yeah,
I've got
man.
all of those here. So those are going to be coming up next. Yeah, so that's what I got. What about you?
Nice. Well, as you know, I have 3 pens inked up. I have this old, Pilot, Namiki Impressions here that I have inked up with Diamine Hope Pink.
Ooh, okay.
I have my Smoke Twisby Swipe inked up with Diamine Marine. And yes, Pilot Stargazer, technically a Pilot Stella 90S, inked up with Diatramentus Lilac, which is a very, very nice purple, Brian.
It is a good color. Yeah.
Very nice purple. So I've got pink, purple, and turquoise.
Nice. Very, dual toned kind of a thing you got going on there.
Kind of like that.
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
Next up.
Next up is from Lunar Knight 22, and the Lunar Knight asks us, shimmer, sheen, color shifting, and more. What special inks do you love most?
Ooh, that's a good question. I
Ooh.
do like special inks. Sheen for sure. I'm a fan of sheen. The color shift thing, I'm getting more into it. It's a newer thing. I've always found them appealing, but honestly, I just love classic shading, like heavy shading inks. That's more of my go-to. I think the other ones are cool, but you get a really good shading inks like Drew the Diamine Marine or Robert Oster Blue Water Ice, or those are just they just always hit the right spot no matter when I pick them up. Never have waned in my love for shading inks. How about you?
Absolutely. Easy for me, and that is color shifting, multitonal chromoshading inks. I love those because they are just as exciting as shading, but with some extra fun and pizzazz. However, you get this among these special feature inks, they give you that special visual component without any additional maintenance, and that is absolutely my jam. I like the fact that I have only 3 pens because I hate cleaning my pens. I don't want to have an overwhelmingly intimidating experience when I do clean my pens. I want it to be easy. I want it to be simple. And if you say that I can get a simple, easy cleaning experience while also getting a fun ink adventure on the paper, please sign me up. Yes, please put it in my pen.
That's true. Shimmer inks and heavy sheeners, they tend to be the higher maintenance side of it.
Not worth it.
Fair enough.
I love the way they look. I love it when other people use them, and I can see them on Instagram, but not in my pens.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Last one.
And then finally, Michael Not 96, favorite Lamy Safari colors. His is petrol.
Petrol's good. I like that color a lot.
Petrol's
I
good.
like petrol.
It's right.
I like charcoal. I like dark lilac. I like the matte black. Honestly, I really like, all the matte colors. Those are my favorites. You didn't even hear what I said, Drew. Look at you, just taking off your earphones.
You probably said you like the Lamy 2000.
Safari colors.
Did you say something about Blue Water Ice, Lamy 2000?
No, yeah, right. No, I like all the darker matte Safari colors. Those are my favorites.
Yeah. So if you had to choose between petrol versus dark lilac, what would you pick?
Oh gosh, I really like them both. I think dark lilac because it's iconic, and I have good memories associated with that. I really like the petrol color too, though. Honestly, it would be if I had to choose between the two, it'd be really, really tough. It'd be really tough. I like them both.
You know what mine is, right?
Yours is going to be the brown, right? The matte brown.
Yes, it is. Friend. I just went. That's what I was doing. I was grabbing that.
That's what you were doing back there.
It's my brown bear pen.
There you go.
He's the best. Bear. We're not brown bear, just brown.
Brown.
All caps.
Brown. That's right.
Quotations.
Line friends.
Brown.
It's got to be yelled. Yelled in all caps. That's pretty good one. That's a pretty good one.
He's the best.
I like the Vista too. I don't know if technically that one would count. I mean, obviously we had the Vista Black, which is what we did as our exclusive. I really like the Vista. Technically, I don't know if you would. I mean, I don't know if it's in the Safari class anymore, but I didn't include that one. But I would put that up there too.
Yep. All right, that's our lightning round, Brian.
Nice.
We have concluded it.
All right, good stuff. Well, that's going to be it for today. Don't go away yet, because I do have some fun facts. It's actually
Ooh, I will stay.
Yeah, but
with bated
I want to
breath.
thank you all for watching. Leave us some feedback. Let us know how we're doing. I mean, we're going to be back next week with a regular show. But in the meantime, you can check out gouletpens.com for fountain pen, ink, and paper needs. You can subscribe to YouTube, Instagram, all that. Email us at pencast@gouletpens.com, especially if you're an audio listener and you got some questions for us. And my random fun fact for today is not related to anything that we were talking about, but I did want to inform you that over your lifetime, you'll produce enough saliva to fill 500 bathtubs or two full swimming pools. So it's about 40,000 liters or 10,500 gallons of saliva. In fact, you'll produce about 6 cups of saliva before the day is out today.
No one listening needed that visual.
Think about that. Think about swimming in a pool of your own saliva.
No, I don't need to think about. Nobody needs to think about that.
So much saliva. That's so much saliva. Isn't that amazing? Human body's so cool.
I mean, I guess, yeah.
I think I'm producing more than 6 cups today because we've been talking about cupcakes and cookies and all this other stuff.
Oh God!
I think I've done 6 cups while we've done this recording. I've done six cups.
I don't need to think about your saliva tub, Brian. Stop it.
Saying. Some people salivate more than others. There's got to be this is an average. This is an average here.
You know what? If anybody's here past your Rubik's Cube discussion, they are probably interested in you talking about bathtubs of saliva. So,
hey, probably not. But you are by accident. So there you go. You're welcome.
Great.
You're welcome, world. That's all we got for this week. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks, everybody, and right on.